abbreviated edition of Three True Values for the Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to get you in, we're going to get you out. We're going to do 2 segments instead of 3. How abbreviated? Well, that depends on how many of these upsets we get to talking about. That's what we're going to do here in the first segment, because we've had a lot of upsets over the past week. A lot of top 25 teams going down to what would be considered inferior competition. We'll talk about that. I've got one complaint to make about the AP Top 25, how it has been shaped out so far this season. We'll talk about that, and then we'll take a break. When we get you out of here, we're going to go into the second segment and give you the games of the week. So like I said, instead of 3 segments, we're going to do 2, a little bit shorter edition of the show so you can enjoy your Thanksgiving festivities, whatever they are, but want to keep you up to date on all things college basketball, especially in this week where so much has happened. So without any further introduction, further talk about it, let's get into it because we have so many of these to get to. As I said, USC lost to UC Irvine. Where did that come from? USC with Boogie Ellis, with Isaiah Collier, with Kobe Johnson. I mean, that's a top 25 team, right? Why are they struggling to take care of business against a UC Irvine? Well, it became a trend throughout the week for teams to struggle against lesser competition. You saw Michigan lose to Long Beach State. That one came out of nowhere as the Michigan transfers who had came in, Namari Burnett, Trey Jackson, Doug McDaniel, he was there, but took his game to another level, seemed to be having a really good season so far. Where did it come from? What is happening across college basketball where USC can drop a game to UC Irvine, Michigan can drop a game to Long Beach State, but it didn't end there. Arkansas drops a game against UNC Greensboro, and you guys know, while I've had my reservations about Michigan, while I wasn't particularly high or low on USC this season, Arkansas was my preseason national championship pick. So some cause for concern for me as I look at that and see them drop a game against UNC Greensboro. So looking at the Razorbacks, what went wrong? Florida Atlantic, they drop a game against Bryant. And now another team that I had my reservations about whether they were going to be as good as last year, but Bryant, we're talking about a quad 4, the net rankings won't come out until next month, so we won't have a firm grasp because as the NCAA has said, they want the computers to have time to input enough data that you're actually getting some kind of message out of what they're giving you instead of it greatly fluctuating over those first couple of weeks. So as we move into December, that will become a quad 4 loss very soon for FAU. It's going to be hard to overcome. Obviously, they will have the opportunity to. They enter the AAC. They'll have a matchup against Memphis, potentially another one in the AAC tournament. And so they will be able to build their resume further this week. They will have opportunities against NCAA tournament quality teams to pick up some wins. So not time to hit the panic button yet if you're FAU. Not time to hit the panic button yet if you're any of these 4 teams. But what we have seen so far is that if you have a poor shooting night, remember we talked about Michigan State. We talked about how badly they shot the ball from 3 and how that was likely not going to sustain over the course of the season. They were going to be just fine. Now, did they lose in the Champions Classic? Yes, but that's a completely different scenario. Talking about a Champions Classic loss to Duke is very different than a loss to James Madison, although Michigan State getting a little bit bailed out, we'll talk about that in a little bit. James Madison is ranked. So not as bad of a loss right now as it appeared to be when it happened. So you go through all of these. And what do you notice about just about every upset we've seen so far in college basketball? The higher ranked team, the team that was expected to dominate, struggled from the 3-point line. In today's NBA, across all levels of basketball, whether it's the NBA, whether it's college basketball, high school basketball to some degree, you're seeing more and more teams that are dependent on the 3-point shot, which means when you go 1 for 20 from 3, when you shoot under 20%, as some of these teams did over the course of 40 minutes, it's going to make it difficult to win a basketball game. Now, it can still be done. if you can get those paint touches, if you can move the ball, create open shots, get to the free throw line by driving to the rim. But if your way to get out of your slump as a three-point shooter and as a three-point shooting team is to shoot more threes, you can easily find yourself in this hole dropping a game against a team you should not have. Now, is that going to happen many times over the course of the year? No, because the law of averages will tell you these teams will shoot in the 30s and 40% way more often than they will shoot below 20%. That's just math. Okay, so this is not some huge issue across the sport of basketball, but it is something that impacts you night to night, and it impacts how you have to look at various teams. Because it's a lot easier to catch a team that is reliant on the three-point shot than it is a team that's going to the paint every time down the floor. Now, there's a case to be made that they're also more difficult to guard, and it's harder to beat them when their shot is on. So there's pros and cons here that come with this modern philosophy surrounding the three-point shot. It's why our namesake of this podcast, Three True Values. Three True Values, for anyone who doesn't know what that podcast name means or just hasn't looked into it, the three true values of basketball, as some people view it, are obviously the three outcomes, positive outcomes, that you can get. You can get a free throw worth 1 point. You can hit a 2-point shot. Anything that's inside the three-point line, that's worth 2 points. And the three-point shot, which is anything outside of that line. Now, the three true values system, the belief system, tells you that a free throw, obviously, is high percentage. Despite being 15 feet from the basket, it is uncontested. So it's a free shot. All right, nobody can contest. You've got your time, you take your time, you got 10 seconds on the line, just you and the basket. All right, so if you can knock that down, that's 1 point. Got to knock down your free throws. If you can hit them above a 75% clip, that's pretty much considered efficient. Anything above that becomes a valuable asset to you. Then you come in to the 2-point shot. Well, the further away you move from the basket, the lower percentage you're going to shoot, particularly as you get closer to the 3-point line, but not behind it. Because the way that players have been trained since the introduction of the 3-point line is to practice their shots behind that line rather than just in front of it, because of the added value that you get from that extra point on the score. So the most efficient 2-point shot is a layup or a dunk, depending on who you are. So the second true value, you've got free throw, you've got layup, and you've got three-pointer. And that three-pointer, you want to be as close to that line as possible to maximize your cross-section between distance from the basket, because that increases the difficulty, with the reward of that extra point if it goes in. Because all you have to shoot from three, if you shoot 33% from the three-point line, then you will have the same number of points as someone who shoots 50% from the 2-point range on the same number of shots. So you can be efficient on a lower percentage once you get beyond that line. Now, yes, it's nerd stuff, it's analytics. You talk about where on the 3-point line to shoot from. Some people prefer the corner, some people think on the wing, some people say the straightaway. You can get into all of that. You can get into even within free throws. There's a discussion between the underhand being more efficient versus shooting the traditional shot. All kinds of discussions within this to maximize your efficiency, to make sure that you are getting the most points per possession possible. But the reality is that whether you're shooting from the free throw line, whether you're shooting within the arc, or if you're shooting outside of it, you're going to have nights where you do that efficiently and nights that you don't. But because of that 3-point shot, the added value of it, when you have a night where you are above that 33%, when you shoot in the 40s, up to 50% from the 3-point line in a game, you are creating so many additional points that the team you're facing has to shoot nearly 70% to keep up with you if they're going to shoot from the 2-point area. So there is a risk and a reward here. If all you're relying on is the 3-point shot, you're playing a very dangerous game because you're ignoring two of the key values, two of the valuable shots in the game of basketball, the layup and the free throw, because there are far fewer free throw shot when you only shoot from the perimeter. You're not drawing as much contact there. And so, yes, there is a need to be versatile. You have to drive and then kick to 3-point shots, move it across the wing, have players capable of getting into the lane, drawing fouls, and finishing at the rim. So when you see these teams, it happens on both sides too. Sometimes it's the team that upsets the big team. Sometimes they just shoot a ridiculous percentage from 3 because they know they can't match up with the athletes. They're not able to drive and finish at the rim against the superior athletes, the taller players, the bigger, more athletic guys that they have. So just shoot from the perimeter. If you hit enough, you can still win the game. So it's one of the biggest debates ongoing within coaching circles, within people who just think about the game, within fans, is how do we want to play? How many 3s should we be taking? How many 2s should we be taking? The real answer there is you should take whatever shot is the most efficient on that play. And this is where people get really confused by this 3 true value system. They believe that you can only shoot a layup or a 3-point shot, unless you get to the free throw line, of course. That's not true. Because a layup surrounded by 3 defenders is not more efficient than a floater from 10 feet out with one guy attempting to close down from the side. That's a way higher percentage shot as long as you practice it. And so it's all about making sure which of your players is capable of different shots, having them stick to that shot, and then when the space is created, there's no reason you can't take a 15-foot pull-up. But if you could have gotten to the rim, you should have done that. Or if you could have stepped back to the 3-point line, you should have done that. So it becomes this interesting debate. People get really locked in on the details and they don't want to go with the feel of the game, which is so important. And so that's why you see the best players in the world are able to kind of use this as a template and then work outside of it when that is the best opportunity they have. You see it in the NBA in particular all the time. Kevin Durant, known for his mid-range jump shot, but that's not the only thing he shoots. He has just worked on his game because he knows everyone's locked in on him. He's got to get to an area of the floor where they will not be paying as much attention to him. So that's just a little bit of a deep dive. I know I said we're keeping it short and now we just went on this little tangent here, but important to focus on the 3 true values, but to make sure that you are taking the most efficient of those 3 true values and the shots that fall within them. So that is oftentimes what goes into these big upsets, into what's happening is either inefficiency from the bigger team or extreme efficiency on the high end of the spectrum from the team performing the upset. So we've seen a mixture of those so far throughout the season. No reason to panic for any of these teams yet, but as we head into these MTEs throughout Thanksgiving week, we will get a chance to see Michigan, Arkansas, all of these teams, FAU, USC, I'm not sure which event they're in. I haven't checked that yet, but we will see these teams against more competition on their level. And we'll get a better read of what they are, as well as continuing to watch them throughout the course of the season. This is why we play 30 games, so that we can see them either grow over the season or regress back to the mean across the full season. So that's all we're going to talk about with these upsets for now. Let's move into one more topic that I want to talk about before we end the show in the second segment. I want to talk to you about the AP Top 25 because I have an issue with it. And I know that the AP Top 25, I'm not going to sit here and call any kind of bias. I don't like the people who vote on it are all across the country. They're voting from plenty of different places. But I think one of the things, especially early in the season, that we struggle with, particularly in basketball, is there's so many games happening. And so not all of these voters have watched every game, and no one has. No one has watched every game so far in the college basketball season. It's just not possible. But sometimes you see some of these decisions and you start to wonder, well, they clearly missed something there. You've got teams that didn't drop in particular ballots after a loss, some of them an upset loss. That's strange. Even one that I saw picked out where the team moved up after an upset loss. Not sure what happened there. But then you look at the bottom of those rankings, and I'm looking particularly at James Madison cracking the top 25 instead of a team like Memphis. A team like Memphis who beat Missouri convincingly on the road and has an opportunity this week to face Michigan, potentially Arkansas. They could play some really big games. North Carolina, I think, is also a potential opponent for them. They can play some really big games in the Bahamas this week. Now, I have no doubt that if they run the table, they win all those games, even if they go 2-1, probably, yeah, they'll probably end up in the top 25 because they had the stage. People watched that tournament, especially with the number of teams, the big brands that are in it this year. But just because James Madison beat Michigan State does not mean they're a top 25 team in the country. It means that they upset a team. Are we going to put UC Irvine in the top 25? Or Bryant, who ranks well under 200 in KenPom? Are we going to put them in the top 25 because they beat FAU, who went to the Final Four last year? It just doesn't make much sense, particularly when the view of James Madison did not really change based on their upset over Michigan State. We talked about this a little bit last week, how they weren't supposed to be a better team over the course of the season just because they beat Michigan State, if you looked at all the projections. Even if you looked at the line for their next game, they went into their game after that. They beat Michigan State. The next game they played, they were underdogs against Kent State. Now, I don't know about you, but not too often have I seen Kent State play a top 25 level opponent and be a favorite in the game. Now, James Madison won that in overtime after a miraculous into regulation. But why is James Madison in the top 25 but an underdog against Kent State? Meanwhile, Memphis, who has the roster with David Jones, Jordan Brown, Javon Quinterly, that's a top 25, borderline top 25 roster. Now, people who left them out of the top 25 to start the season, no issue with that. I thought that was right where they should have been, right on the cusp. But now they've shown you they can beat a big opponent, an NCAA tournament caliber opponent in Missouri, at least in my eyes. And so where's the reward? Or was no one watching that game, and so it didn't make an impact with the voters? It'll be interesting to see this next week when the AP poll comes out, what it looks like, whether this changes things. You know, we'll see what happens in these MTEs and get you an updated look at these different teams. So, talking about MTEs, we're going to talk about them more on the other side when we get you your games of the week, and then we'll get you out of here. Thanks for listening to 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values as we wrap up the show for you today. We get you the games of the week as we do every week. We'll lay out for you each day of the week, and I know we've got Thanksgiving coming up this week. So we'll have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all the way through till next Monday. We'll get you through the week until we talk again with the one basketball game that you should be watching each day of the week. So as we keep going through this tonight on Tuesday, I know this episode airing a little bit later than usual, had some travel over the past week, so had to push it back just a couple hours. Nothing too serious, but we're going to be pushing a little close. So you might have already watched this game or you might have missed this game by the time you're listening to it. Don't worry about it. You can go look at the box score. You can look at the highlights, and hopefully you will have already had it on, because we're going with number 1 Kansas versus number 4 Marquette. Big time matchup in the Maui Invitational. And I believe, not 100% sure, but I believe Bill Walton will also be on the call. You know, here at 3 True Values, we're huge fans of just enjoying the Bill Walton experience whenever he is calling a game. So you won't want to miss that for sure. On Wednesday, we're going to go with, and remember here that there will be more games and potentially better games to watch on these days. We're going with the games that are set, that we know the opponents for, when we're telling you what to watch on these specific days. So there might be a game that ends up being a little bit better that you would prefer to watch. Go ahead and watch it, because we don't know all of the matchups and how they're going to land right now as things stand. On Wednesday, though, we're going to go with Memphis versus Michigan. Hey, complain that not enough people have watched Memphis so far. Here's your chance. Go watch Memphis. See them play against Michigan on Wednesday in the battle for Atlantis. On Thursday, we're going to go with Arizona against Michigan State. Michigan State, we've watched them a couple times now. And this Arizona team we've watched before. So 2 teams that we've gotten a look at. Let's see how they match up. Also, 2 common opponents for the Duke Blue Devils. 1 beat Duke, 1 lost. And so we'll see kind of how close those 3 teams really are together based on what happens in this one. On Friday, we're going with Alabama against Ohio State in the Emerald Coast Classic. 2 Power 5 teams facing off in an MTE event. Always going to be fun. On Saturday, as always, during football season, it's a lighter slate than usual. And so as we're looking around, as we're trying to find something to watch, if we need basketball on the television, we're going to go ahead and go with whatever MTEs are on, because there will be a couple of those events going on. You'll get to see the Emerald Coast Classic, I believe, the Baja Mar Hoops event. You'll get to see the Acrisure Invitational. So there will be different events going on. You'll get to see some MTE basketball, some interesting matchups, teams that they're not able to prepare for each other in the same way they do most opponents. Then on Sunday, let's watch Texas against Wyoming. Wyoming's starting the season well. They're 4-1 so far. Texas had a scare just a couple days ago against Louisville, but they survived it, and they are 4-1 currently. And then on Monday, as we kind of bring ourselves into the next week, only 1 top 25 team in action. It's UConn, the defending champs. So let's watch UConn against New Hampshire before we meet up again next week to talk about all things college basketball. So there's a few games that you can watch over the course of the next week. Like I said, though, keep an eye on the Maui Invitational, keep an eye on the Battle for Atlantis, and any other MTEs that you find on your television with some good matchups. I'll be doing the same throughout the course of the next week. We'll come back and we'll talk about all of these games and more right here on 3 True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for listening once again, guys.